Hi, VencoreWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Tuesday, January 23rd. We have a cold frontal system heading into the Mid-Atlantic region this morning. Occasional showers for the next several hours, maybe even another rumble of thunder. Some of the rain can be heavy at times. All that winds down later on today, and colder air moves back into the I-95 corridor tonight. Northwest winds will usher in that colder air in the overnight hours. Could be some spots with black ice late tonight, early tomorrow morning as temperatures drop to near 30 degrees or so. Stays chilly Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, but this will be a moderate cold, a seasonal cold, not like any of the severe cold that we have experienced many times over the past few weeks. Turns warmer again over the weekend, then briefly colder early next week, then warmer again by the middle part of next week, and by that time we're into the early part of February. Now, beyond that, it looks like we very well could be headed towards another extended period of colder than normal weather for the central and eastern U.S. Last week we talked about the MJO index. This is an index that tracks tropical turbulence that propagates eastward around the globe. It has an impact on temperature patterns and precipitation patterns. Again, we talked about this and how this particular index, shown as a forecast here in green, going out the next couple of weeks, goes through what we call different phases here. These are actually the phases here, phase 5, 6, and 7 of this particular index called the MJO index. Empirical studies, research studies have shown that these particular phases, 5, 6, and 7, usually end up with warmer than normal conditions in the central and eastern U.S. Indeed, we're experiencing that right now. It looks like we will right into next week, the early part of February. Beyond that, however, the MJA looks like it'll probably continue through phase 8 and then 1 and 2. Those three phases actually usually result in colder than normal conditions in the central and eastern U.S. So this is one sign for a return to a sustained period or an extended period of colder than normal conditions as we move through much of February. And indeed, it looks like there may be signs that that cold pattern will continue into March as well. Now let's take a look at the stratosphere, because this is also providing some supporting evidence for a return to a colder pattern during the month of February. Well, what we're looking at here is a top-down view of the North Pole. The North Pole right in the center of this particular map of temperatures here. And we're looking way up in the atmosphere, 10 millibars. This is the stratosphere, and it can play a crucial role in wintertime temperature patterns across much of the world. If there's a stratospheric warming event, that often results in the displacement of some cold air at the high latitudes down towards the middle latitudes. And indeed, it looks like over the next 10 days or so, we'll have quite an impressive stratospheric warming event centered near the North Pole. Again, this is the way the current temperature pattern exists. Cold air centered pretty much over the North Pole region here. Now, what we're going to do is go out 10 days, a 10-day forecast from the GFS model here. Again, just looking at stratospheric temperatures. And here it is. This is a 10-day forecast. This red and orange right here indicates much warmer conditions here near the North Pole in 10 days. Again, we're going from this right now to this in 10 days. This is a stratospheric warming event according to this particular models. Other models tend to support this. Now, what this means is that in the stratosphere, when it warms, that particular layer will expand. Anytime a layer of air warms, it'll tend to expand. And with the expansion of the upper part of the atmosphere, usually that'll result in a contraction or a cooling of the lower part of the atmosphere, in this case the troposphere. So with the stratospheric warming headed to near the North Pole in the next 5 to 10 days or so, the troposphere in that part of the world will tend to cool off. And oftentimes that sets off a chain of events that displaces that cold air in the troposphere down to from the high latitudes down to the lower latitudes. It doesn't necessarily mean that cold air will be displaced into North America. Sometimes it ends up on the other side of the North Pole in places like Siberia, for for example. But there are other signals that are pointing to the return of this cold air into Canada and then ultimately into the central and eastern U.S. during the month of February. Well, one of those signals that in fact we already talked about that indicates central and eastern U.S. cool down is that MJO index. Again, that's a tropical disturbance that propagates eastward around the globe, and it looks like it'll move into phases 8, 1, and 2 during the month of February. That typically results in colder than normal weather for the central and eastern U.S. This is the Arctic Oscillation Index, yet another index that meteorologists look at during the wintertime especially. The red here is a forecast over the upcoming couple of weeks, and generally it's on the negative side. This is a neutral line right here. Anything below is in negative territory. Arctic oscillation this time of the year in negative territory generally indicates there's high pressure over the higher latitudes, places like Greenland, Iceland, all the way into the northeastern part of Canada. That usually results in some colder air masses dropping from way up in Canada down into the central and eastern U.S. So certainly there are signals for a return to a colder pattern in the month of February between the MJO, the Arctic Oscillation, and the stratospheric warm event. Looks like indeed will likely follow this thaw over the next week or so with a colder pattern, probably an extended period of colder than normal weather developing during February, perhaps even lasting all the way through the month of February and into March. That's it for now. For VencoreWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.